Of course, as we continue to bring you some reaction on this end, we're joined by Abigail Ngobene, who's a legal analyst, to give us some insight on the intricacies of this court matter. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Advocate Butlender today saying the matter lacks jurisdiction and is an abuse of power. What did you make of today's deliberations in court?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show, and I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a very long day and a very interesting arguments that were heard by the court today on this particular matter. And as far as what it was argued to say the matter lacks merit, there are a lot of arguments that were raised to say, if you check in the affidavit of Moore, you will find that it is a requirement for one to show the injury that may have to be sustained, which allows them, of course, to institute a private prosecution in matters such as this. So what was happening in court today was a lot of arguments, but in the main, the argument was this is an abuse of processes, that the case lacks merits, and of course, that there was no... Part of the arguments, of course, we heard from a lot of counsels, ranging from the friends of the court and that of Advocate Ngobene and that of Karyn Maughan. But, of course, of the bottom issue is the fact that this is an abuse of court processes.
Yes. What my colleague Zianda Ngobo was talking to just a short while ago was what friend of the court, Advocate Kate Hofmeyer, had to say, saying that when it comes to how the law has been applied, there are a lot of question marks there. What is it that we need to understand about the application of the law?
Well, it could mean a lot of things, but of course we are going to hear what the court will say when the judgment is granted. But there are a lot of elements that needs to be taken into consideration. Even the manner in which this certificate has been relied on. You remember that the certificate was only issued with the name of Advocate Ngobene on it, and there is no reference to Karyn to have that to have her prosecuted privately by the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma. So in those bases, there are a lot of arguments to say, was it legally a lawful right for Karyn to be brought before court when there is no certificate that clearly points out to say she should be joined as accused number 2 on the private prosecution?
What are the ways that this matter could eventually play out? I mean, looking at the two options that could possibly be put on the table.
It's going to be interesting to hear what Advocate Dalimpo, the lead counsel for Mr. Zuma, will say in response to all the arguments. But you will remember that there are issues that are raised specifically with regard to Karyn Maughan, where there is a right in the Constitution. I think this was raised as well by the friend of the court, that there's a right in the Constitution. I think it's Section 16, which is a freedom of expression, particularly when it relates to the freedom of press and media. And he raised arguments on whether or not this particular right is not penetrable or is not something that can be pierced or pushed through for one to be held liable in a court of law. Criminally, but of course, on the other part of it, you will see that there are issues such as whether the abuse. There are a lot of things that were raised. Abuse that was directed to Moore by the members of the public, and she seeks this interdict for that to come to a stop. There are issues such as whether this particular document, which is a point of contention, which is alleged to have been leaked by Advocate Downer, is it really in a document where Mr. Zuma may have suffered injury by its release, particularly because there was a judgment by, I think, the Pietermaritzburg High Court to say that particular document did not necessarily have Mr. Zuma suffer particular injury, which may necessitate that a private prosecution be instituted. So there are a lot of things that the court will consider, of course, but we will hear what the court will say when the judgment is delivered.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your time and analysis. Abigail Ngobene, legal analyst there, giving us some insight on the matter at play when it comes to the Zuma-Downer-Maughan case at the Pietermaritzburg High Court.